Welcome to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, president and founder of the Current Consulting Group. And once again, I'm joined by Brian Thiele, vice president of the Consulting Group. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thank you, Bill.
So this is part of our ongoing series of podcast episodes about oral fluid testing. As many of you know, oral fluid testing is growing in popularity. A lot of people are asking questions, some of the very basic issues, but also some very advanced issues. And today we're gonna talk about drug test cheating. But before we launch into that, I just invite you to visit our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. Look up past episodes of Currently Speaking. Find us on all the popular podcast platforms like YouTube, Amazon, Audible, etc., Apple. Anywhere where you would normally watch or listen to a podcast, you'll be able to find Currently Speaking. Like us, share us, help us build up our follower group and be a part of the Current Consulting Group, Currently Speaking community. We would welcome your participation. And if you have any suggestions or ideas on how we can improve Currently Speaking, we'd love to hear those from you as well. So we have a different track each week for Currently Speaking, and one of those tracks that we're doing on an ongoing basis is oral fluid testing. It's one of the hot issues in the drug testing world and among employers, especially since May of last year when the U.S. Department of Transportation issued final regulations for lab-based oral fluid testing. They're finalized, they're in place, they're not quite usable yet. We have an episode of Currently Speaking that deals with the DOT regulations and what things have to fall into place and be completed before employers can start using lab-based oral fluid testing. So check out that episode of Currently Speaking. But we are issuing a different episode every couple, 3 weeks. And you can find past episodes of Currently Speaking at our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. Today, we're going to talk about an issue that is always of concern to employers and drug testing providers, and that's drug test cheating. How urine testing and oral fluid testing compare in terms of how people try to subvert a drug test with those samples. And of course, if you've been doing drug testing for any length of time, you know that it's pretty common for people to try to subvert a urine test. We're going to talk about that first, and then we'll launch into the oral fluid testing. But Brian, what are some of the ways that people have become successful at cheating with a urine drug test?
Sure, and just to start out with, something you said about employers having concerns about the drug test cheating. It's something that's been near and dear to me after so many years. As you know, I've helped to launch oral fluid testing 25, 26 years ago. And one of the things that we really, reasons that we really did this was because it was a way that, you can collect a sample under directly observed conditions. So you're not sending someone into a bathroom, and you're not dealing with the typical things that have come about creating opportunities for people to beat their urine drug test. And so employers should be very concerned about cheating on a urine drug screen. After all, this is when you buy and you pay for your drug testing program, you expect there to be an ROI on that program, and you really want there to be a sound, reliable methodology that you're using that people aren't finding a way around. And the double-edged sword here for urine screening has been around for 30 years, right? So it's well accepted, it's well established, very accurate. The downside to it has been 30 years, and so you have a lot of people that are creative, and they've found ways to beat a urine drug test. We used to say if you can't beat your urine drug test, you just haven't studied for it. So some of the ways that have done that, and I should say this, when we started to look into oral fluid and launched it, and then started to look at the drug cheating methods for urine, and you do a Google search, you'll find literally millions of hits on ways to beat your urine drug test. Not that there's millions of products, but there's lots and lots of activity on the website and on the internet related to products that can help you beat your urine drug screen. And some of those relate to either the adulteration of the sample, dilution of the sample or substitution of the sample. And so when we're talking about adulteration, that means you're going into a clinic to give your sample, or at a site where you're giving your urine sample, and you've added something to that sample that will, by the time it gets to the lab, it's going to interfere with the test, the drug test that's being done. Lots of different adulterants out there. Additives that you add to the sample, things that are colorless, don't have any scent. And so you're essentially adding something to the sample that will mess up the drug test itself. And those are very prevalent. In fact, they're so prevalent that the laboratories have added methodologies to look for suspicious things that should not be in the sample. And look for things like a change in the pH of the sample, and look for abnormal creatinine levels, look for nitrates, and things that are the typical things that shouldn't be there, to have to do it. And the sad part about it is, when you look at the panel of adulterants that the labs test for with a urine sample, it's almost as much, if not more, than the tests they're running for the drugs, which is, really a shame. But so you have adulterants, you have a technique that's also very common, which is diluting your sample. So with the right level of care and instructions, I can consume enough fluid leading up to my drug test, and I can actually start to use some of the carbo drinks and things that are cleansing agents that will help me clear drugs from my urine, my bladder. And that's a dilution technique, which, by the way, doesn't work with oral fluid because you can't dilute your oral fluid. So the dilution factor is one that can be done. And then you have just the overall substitution category. And what is that, and how could you do it? Well, you can do it. You can bring a sample of urine, of fake urine or someone else's urine, into a clinic and into the bathroom. And if you're careful, you can actually provide someone else's urine sample or a synthetic sample into a container, bring it out to the agent that's waiting for you to come out of the bathroom. It can be the right temperature of the urine sample. It can look like urine. It can even smell like urine. So, those are some of the ways that they're beating it.
So, in doing some research for an article I wrote about drug test cheating, I came across this one website that said the best way to beat an oral fluid drug test is to stop using drugs. So how many of these traditional drug test cheating methods actually apply to oral fluid? Are there products on the market that claim to be able to beat an oral fluid test?
Yeah, there are, Bill, but far fewer than you'll see with urine drug cheating products. And the ones that are out there are typically geared toward doing one of two things. When we first looked at this, back in the kind of around 2005, 2006 timeframe, there was a product called Spit and Clean, which came out. And it turned out, we ordered it, of course, and tried it and analyzed it. It's a very, very high salt concentration fluid. And the idea was you would take this, and by the way, it almost tastes like you were in the ocean and had a bunch of salt water in your mouth. But anyway, you take this, if you time it right, and this is all part of the trickiness of trying to get it to work. If you time it right, before you go in for your drug test, you gargle with this fluid, and you spit it out, and you go in immediately to give an oral fluid sample. And the idea is that all that salt is supposed to dry out your mouth and prevent you from giving as good of a saliva sample as you would otherwise provide. The flaw in that is a lot of the collection devices now have a volume indicator, so they're just going to wait for you to provide enough oral fluid to hit the volume indicator. And number two, even though your mouth might be dry, when you start to use the oral fluid collection devices and you're swabbing your mouth, it literally is a process that generates oral fluid. It's a stimulant by moving something in your mouth. Just think about it, right? When you put something in your mouth, you move it around, let's say a lollipop or whatever, it tends to generate oral fluid flow. So the salt solution technique really doesn't work all that well. There's some other products out there that contain, like gums and a few other things that contain peroxide and some agents that are supposed to and probably would interfere with the assay itself. There aren't a lot of them out there, but you can find them, and we tested them, and found them to be effective if you do not pay attention to the collection protocol. And I think that might be a question coming up next, how to sort of prevent this from happening. So I won't jump ahead, but bottom line is the answer to your question is there's much fewer products out there for oral fluid, and if you're careful, they're not going to really they're not going to be effective in cheating a drug test.
Now, some states, not a lot, but a small growing number of states have passed laws that make it a crime of some nature to try to subvert a drug test. I'm not sure how effective these laws are. The penalties are usually pretty minor. But what can an employer do to prevent drug test cheating if they've switched to oral fluid testing, for example, and they want to make sure that their applicants or their employees are not continuing to try to cheat now that they're using oral fluid testing? What can they do to prevent that?
Yeah. Typically, and I'll throw this out there too, relative to urine testing. If you're really stuck on urine and that's the only methodology you want to utilize for whatever reason, just make sure that the site that your employees or your applicants are going to is really well accredited and has really good procedures in place to avoid people coming in with products. They, all the typical things that should be done while they're a hassle and they're probably time consuming for these clinics. They really have to watch, the people have to watch out for suspicious behavior. They have to have people empty their pockets if they do think that there's something suspicious going on. In the bathroom, they have to eliminate they have to have bluing agent in the toilet. They have to eliminate any fluids in that bathroom. There can't be this, there can't be that. So it's onerous, but if you're really stuck on urine, check with your provider, check with your collection site to make sure they have all those protocols in place and that people are trained. Not just that they have. It's great to have all the protocols in place, but if your technicians, nursing staff, whatever, are not really that well trained on it, they could bypass a protocol that ends up being very important. So that's just a kind of sidebar on the urine testing. With oral fluid, really, the key thing with making sure that people don't cheat on an oral fluid drug test is adhering to the manufacturer's protocol on that collection procedure. And a very typical one that we've all adopted in oral fluid testing and development of our devices is a 10-minute wait period. Some people even go 15 minutes, but a 10-minute wait period prior to collecting that oral fluid sample from an individual. And what happens? Well, during that 10-minute time period, the oral fluid in your mouth, in our mouths, tends to change over. It's a conversion process. So what's in my saliva right now will be gone within 10 minutes. So, and there'll be a new, call it, batch of oral fluid that's really coming through your glands and into your saliva at that time. So that's why that's important. That may seem a bit of a time frame to wait, but in reality, a lot of the collections we've observed with employers doing their collections, they're with that applicant or with that employee for 10 minutes, at least 5 or 10 minutes before time. So what people can typically do is make sure that they're comfortable that a 10-minute time period has elapsed, and you're good. But if someone walks in the door, sits down to do a collection, and you haven't been with them, that 10-minute wait period is pretty important. The other thing that's coming about, if you read the SAMHSA and DOT guidelines, is there's actually a protocol now in place for those that will be trained on doing oral fluid collections, where they will inspect the mouth. They'll have the applicant or the employee open their mouth. They'll look for anything that could be in there, anything suspicious. It's not, you don't have to do a full dental exam, but you have to just do a check and balance to make sure they don't have anything in their mouth. And that will help too. I think those are really the two key things: observing suspicious behavior, doing a quick check on the mouth, and make sure you adhere to the manufacturer's protocol for that collection procedure.
And of course, as you mentioned, every oral fluid drug test is 100% observed. So the donor and the collector/observer are always right in front of each other. There's really no opportunity, or very little opportunity, if the collector's paying attention, for somebody to do something at the last minute or on site to try to subvert that process.
That's
Um,
correct.
you know, there's always going to be people out there who will try to cheat on a drug test. For them, it's just maybe their drug use habits are too strong, and they need the job, but at the same time they can't stop using drugs. And so, rather than get their act together, they're going to try to find a way to cheat on the drug test. I remember a story that I heard long time ago. An MRO, a medical review officer, was telling of an experience he had where a man came in. He'd done a urine drug test, and he now had the result. The result went through the confirmation process and all the way to the MRO. And the MRO contacted this man to let him know that he had good news and bad news. The good news was that his drug test was negative, but the bad news was that he was pregnant. And so obviously he had used his girlfriend's urine apparently
Yeah,
to try to pass this test. And there are thousands of stories like that. If you talk to Chuck Martin, who's become famous in our industry on the drug test cheating issue. In fact,
sure.
we'll probably schedule a podcast with Chuck. But he has 1,000 stories and some really startling statistics on the frequency in which people will attempt to cheat on their drug tests. So more to come on that, let's say. But that's a great explanation, Brian. Anything else on drug test cheating and oral fluid testing?
Well, so I would just throw this in, Bill, that I described a situation with urine collections that were in a clinic, that were sort of a patient service center based, right? And I think that as an employer, you probably can feel at least a little bit more secure that there are good protocols in place, and that as long as you check them with your provider and with them, and you really should go out and have a tour of that facility. If your employees are going there or your applicants, you should know what's happening and feel good about that collection site. The bigger concern may be in locations where someone is providing a urine sample that's not so regulated and not so tight. Construction sites, places where people are just coming in for a job, and staffing companies might be a good example too. They're just coming in, going into a bathroom, and providing a urine sample. They're doing a quick dip test, and those would be the biggest concern to me if I were an employer, because there's really not a lot of good checks and balances going on in some of those facilities where someone is going into a bathroom and providing a urine sample. So just watch out for that. Those are great opportunities for oral fluid.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Currently Speaking. Visit our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find the archive of our past episodes of Currently Speaking. You'll also find Currently Speaking at all the popular podcast platforms, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, Audible, etc. Anywhere where you would normally watch or listen to a podcast, you'll be able to find Currently Speaking. Thank you again for joining us, and this concludes another episode of Currently Speaking.